Hey, what is going on, guys? In today's video, we're going to have a discussion about being effective on controller in Project Era, and we're going to be more talking about an overall approach to being successful rather than talking about any one individual skill, such as using aim assist to its maximum. We're going to be focused on an overall approach. It seems like you guys have really enjoyed the discussion videos I've done so far, and I was also specifically requested to do a video specifically on controller gameplay, so that's what we're going to do today. Now, I think really your step zero almost to being successful with controller is to reset your mindset from where it might be had you played modern Fortnite in really the last three years, because you have to remember in modern Fortnite the aim assist is fundamentally different. You have a linear input curve. You have reset on release, confirm edit on release. You have an edit sensitivity. You have disable pre-edits. None of that exists in Project Era. So if you go into Project Era almost hoping that your skills would transfer over one-to-one, I think you're setting yourself up for disappointment, honestly. That's not really going to be your best approach. I think your better approach is just going to be to, hey, let's reset our playstyle. Almost think of this as a new game and come at it at a fresh perspective in a sense. So the first thing to mention is that, of course, keyboard, mouse, and controller are mixed in the same lobby. So on controller, you are going to have to be able to beat keyboard and mouse players. Keyboard and mouse, let's be honest, is overall the better input device in Project Era. Does controller have some certain advantages that are better than keyboard? Sure. But overall, keyboard is the superior option. In terms of aim, it heavily depends on the scenario, which is better. But in terms of builds and edits, keyboard and mouse is going to win every single time if they are an equal skill or better player. You know, on controller, we don't have linear input curves. We don't have an edit sense. We only have a build sense, right? And there's a lot of disadvantages. Keyboard and mouse can pull off some crazy piece control plays, right? Scroll wheel reset, pull off all sorts of things that you're just not going to be able to pull off on controller. So trying to outbuild or out-edit a keyboard player of equal skill, I don't think is your best bet. Instead, I think you should focus on maximizing your one advantage, which is aim in certain situations, to be able to win these fights. So let's just go over the different types of fights that you can run into and whether they're going to be favorable for you or not. The most common type of fight in Fortnite is going to be that extremely close range battle in build fights, box fights, where you're really close, you're doing a lot of hip firing, a lot of quick builds, piece controlling, that kind of stuff. This is one of the worst scenarios you can be for a controller. The reason why is that you basically have no aim assist with a controller at close range if you're not aiming down sights. So it's going to be very hard to aim. And again, you're not going to be able to outbuild and out-edit. So this is a scenario you want to try and avoid if possible. But of course, you are going to have to take these fights. It is inevitable. The next range that you can take a fight in is sort of the SMG AR range where there's no damage fall off on ARs. SMGs are doing almost full damage, right? It's maybe like 2 tiles out to maybe, so 10 to 50 meters, something like that. You can definitely laser people at this range. And this is a little bit better for controller. On the aim front, it's going to be pretty close. Rapidly spamming L2 at this range is genuinely effective, and you could argue you might have slightly better range than keyboard, but building is still very important at this range, and you're going to be at that disadvantage. So while this is a more favorable scenario than point blank, it's not ideal, but you can definitely work this range. The one position where I think controller has the advantage is at that 50 to about 200 meter range. Well, fights don't always take place in this big window. What it does allow you to do is use the L2 tap fire method. So instead of rapidly spamming it like 5 times a second in full autoing, what you're going to want to do is get as close as possible while hip firing, tap L2, which will snap your crosshair onto the target if you're close, fire, and then release L2 and repeat that process over and over again. If you're close enough with the hip fire aiming before you tap L2, you're almost guaranteed to get a hit, and it is very reliable. And this is the one scenario where I think controller is actually better than keyboard and mouse overall. Your aim is significantly better if you're equally skilled, and builds are not that important at this range. You're just throwing up some simple walls, maybe a couple ramps, like nothing crazy. So this is a scenario where you want to be in as much as possible on controller, because this is where you actually legit at the same skill level, you could argue you actually are at an advantage. Then the final engagement you can take is that super long range sniper duel. You don't want to take a sniper duel. With scope weapons, you can't use aim assist properly because you can't scope in and out to like get a snap effect. That doesn't really work. And you have to lead your shot. So even if you could get the snap effect reliably, it's gonna snap your crosshair to the target instead of in front of them, so that's not helpful. So that's a fight you definitely want to avoid. So now I kind of want to talk about your mindset and approach to taking fights when you see someone in Project Era. So if you get spotted first, obviously you're gonna have to take the fight on their terms because they shot you first. But assuming you can spot them first, or you spot each other at the same time, your top priority should be to try and force an AR range engagement of 50 to 200 meters. The reason why is because, as I said, this is the position where controller is the strongest relative to keyboard and mouse. And if you can force this sort of ranged engagement where you're both ARing each other, there's a good chance you can win it because if you are equally skilled, you likely have a better aim than the keyboard player, which means you can make really good trades with the AR. Even if you're taking damage, you know what? There's Cypher. You can get it back, and you can hopefully out-trade them at range. But you have to ask yourself when this fight starts, do you hear a sniper? Not a thermal scoped AR, scoped AR. I'm talking hunting, bolt, or heavy. If they don't have any of those three, just keep it an AR fight until you have a significant health advantage. If they can't snipe you, you're not going to just randomly get one shot by them. So focus on just continuously taking AR peaks because there's a good chance you're going to out-trade them. And once, maybe they're low, maybe they got 50 HP and you still have 150, well then go, okay, then at that point you can push forward, make it a box fight if you have to, and just finish the fight. If you have 3 times the health, even though you're not at an advantage in a box fight, you should still be able to win. But you want to keep it as long range as possible until you have a big advantage before pushing in and finishing the kill. Now, what if they do have a sniper though? Well, now taking that ranged AR fight, that's a very risky maneuver because now you could just randomly get sniped out of nowhere if you're not careful. So I don't recommend at that point you take the AR peak game. You are going to have to push closer. The reason why is because as you get closer, ARs and SMGs get more and more effective, while snipers aren't really gaining anything off of getting closer. So if you get to that SMG range I talked about, 10 to 50 meters or so, where SMGs and ARs are pretty effective, that's where you're going to want to use that rapid L2 and try and take the fight from there. You're less at risk of getting sniped. You still need to be careful, but you're at a significantly lower risk. And from this range, they're more likely to try and hit shotgun shots on you. And even if they hit you for 40 with a pump, you probably can out-trade them spraying an SMG or AR. So that's kind of the position you want to take. Once you get them low, of course, then you can force a box fight, a build fight, that kind of thing. But trying to keep it at range is really what you need to be doing. Now, of course, not every engagement is going to be able to take these ranged fights. Sometimes it's going to be really long range with a sniper duel. Here's the simple truth. Unless you're really good with snipers, don't take a sniper duel. If you are 250 meters out and you're sniping each other, either A, try and get way closer, or B, if you don't have the maximum ability to do that, just disengage from that fight. You're so far away from them, they're not going to be able to catch you realistically. And if you can disengage, find them again later, and take it at a more advantageous range, that's where it's going to be at for you. I really do not recommend you try and deal with sniping duels because that's just not where you're at your strongest. Now, the bigger problem is going to be those really close range fights because build fights and box fights are very common. You can't not take them. So, obviously, if your building skill is equal to the keyboard player or your editing skill is equal, well, then you're probably overall the better player because you're going to have an aim advantage. But in most scenarios, if you took an average skill controller, an average skill keyboard, it's very likely the keyboard player is going to have better builds and edits. So, that box fighting is very risky. You have a couple options though. Option 1. If you feel like it's just an unwinnable fight and you have mobility to disengage, if you can disengage and change the position, make it a ranged fight, that's where it's going to be at for you. If you can rift up, even if they follow you and you can get on the ground first, there's a good chance you can laser them out of the sky and totally change the fight dynamics. So that's something also worth trying. If you aren't able to do that, you don't have mobility items, another thing you can do is try and just increase the range just a few tiles. Even if you can get 10 or 15 meters distance between you and your opponent, you're making the fight more favorable because at like 0 meters or 1 meter, keyboard and mouse has a ginormous advantage over you. But if you can increase that range, that advantage shrinks over time. Do I still think keyboard is going to be overall better? Yeah, but at a little bit more range, you're a little bit more likely to win that fight. However, sometimes that's just not possible. The keyboard player is better than you. They're piece controlling you. They're putting you under a lot of pressure. What can you do? At that point, you just have to go for a gunplay. That's what I usually do. If you don't have the mechanical skill to, get yourself out of that through builds and edits, your only option is going to be to go for an aggressive gunplay. A couple options, you could try and pre-fire when they take your wall with a shotgun. You could do some tricks like spraying through your own wall with an SMG and then hoping you can laser them. That's an option. You're going to be in a tough situation because if you're at that point blank range, you're at a massive build and edit disadvantage, there's not a lot you can really do. So you're just going to have to focus on trying to out aim them. If you can't increase the range, you're just going to have to go for a gunplay. That's really the only way you're going to win that fight. So to conclude, look, I'm not trying to say that you should never ever take a build or box fight or anything like that, because it's one, it's inevitable, and two, sometimes it is advantageous to force the issue if you have some sort of like health advantage or they're under pressure at third party, something like that. The idea of this video is not to discourage you from never taking those fights. The idea is just to kind of think about your mindset and think about, if you have the opportunity to take a longer range fight, consider doing that, because you are going to have the most advantage if you're at a further range rather than super up close. So if the situation calls for it, don't be afraid to take a long range fight, even though that may seem unintuitive. So thank you for watching this video, everybody. I hope this helps you, and I will see you in the next Gamer Coach video.